Royals great Denny Matthews had a call back in 2014 that I think could compare to last night's victory. We'll talk about it next on Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. You also can find us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're also on YouTube as well, so you can go give us a subscribe over there. Or if you don't want to and you listen to the other platforms, that's all the same to me. Maybe leave a review, though, if you want to continue getting this podcast out there. I know I do, but if you want to spread the word, helping me doing so would be, giving some feedback, good feedback or bad feedback for that matter. It's all helpful to me. And on YouTube, if you want to continue to help boost those numbers, just hit that little red subscribe button. Today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Don't waste any more time and going and putting some money down on some of your favorite players out there. Baseball now is near 45 games into the season, over the 25% mark for that matter. And NBA is in full swing in the playoffs. So if you want to start making some money, making those picks, do so over at PrizePicks. If you are a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me, I'm based here in Kansas City. I work over at Sports Radio 810 WHB. I do some co-hosting, some hosting, and some producing as well. In fact, I have a schedule release show for the NFL tonight from 6 to 7, just going over the Chiefs schedule. And I know the official release is 7 to 8. But whatever we got at that point, I'll be able to dive into a little bit. Now, for why I'm doing an episode this morning, didn't have one last night, had a family matter that was going on. Didn't really have the time after that got wrapped up. It was, near midnight. By the time I would have gotten it out, it would have been near 2 a.m. So I thought, why not just get up a little bit early, do a podcast in the morning, and then I'm also going to do one later on this evening after Game 3 between the Royals and the Mariners. So not to worry, even though it's Wednesday, we've only done one episode. We're going to get 2 in today, so we'll be at 3 even before we head off to the final 2 episodes of the week. And next week, not going to have any shows. I'll be out on vacation. So that will just be a week where you can follow me on Twitter, get some insight on what's going on with the Royals in their series with Oakland and their series with the Detroit Tigers. So that's just a little bit of a programming note that don't expect any episodes next week. I will be out on vacation. Thought for a second about maybe doing some episodes while I was on vacation, but just simply not going to have the time. And feel like I just need the 5 days of rest, to be honest with you. But I'll still be giving some insight over on Twitter if you want to give me a follow at JohnnyJ_15. Okay, so last night, the Royals had a come-from-behind victory, a wild come-from-behind victory is what I should say, against the Seattle Mariners. It snapped an 8-game losing streak that they had at T-Mobile Park. They had been swept in back-to-back years, and it looked like for the first 6 innings, this loss was going to go maybe the same way that a handful of the losses had gone for the Royals in 2024, which was the offense just didn't do enough. The pitching staff might have been able to do their part, might have been able to throw a quality start, but the offense just couldn't hit a really good pitcher. Maybe that pitcher wasn't even good that the Royals were facing. Last night, that was quite the opposite. Logan Gilbert is the number 2 in that rotation. I mean, that Mariners rotation is ridiculous when you have George Kirby, who finished 8th in Cy Young voting last year, as the number 3. But we had an episode on Monday that came out in the early hours of Tuesday morning, actually, about Nelson Velasquez. And I thought it was fitting last night that Nelson Velasquez was able to just throw it in my face. Now, who are you to doubt me? Who are you to criticize my power? I'm the main reason that the Royals won last night. And I think that's the best case I can make. Nelson Velasquez, with his go-ahead 3-run bomb, his first home run since April 4th, that was a difference maker. That flipped the game upside down. And when that happened, it made me think of a moment back in 2014. Not identical moments, and it happened much later in 2014, but I thought it would be at least interesting to bring up today. If we can jump in the time machine and go back to 2014, I think this game was in August, if I remember. And the Royals were making their wild card push, as we all became very familiar with. But there was a game at Kauffman Stadium against Minnesota. And Glenn Perkins, established Twins closer at the time, he was also an all-star in 2015, and I think 14 for that matter. Really good lefty. He was trying to close out a 1-0 game between the Royals and the Twins. And Alex Gordon came to the plate with a runner at first. Believe there was nobody out. So the Royals were already making things interesting, making Glenn Perkins sweat a little bit. And Denny Matthews, who was on the call, was doing the ninth inning, as he usually does. He had a quote that I think I have remembered in every single season. I just haven't really been able to apply it. 2015, you could. 2016, for a little bit, you could. 2017, after that, I couldn't use the quote without smiling, because it wouldn't have made any sense when the team is, losing 100 games. They are 30 games under 500, 40 games under 500. But Denny Matthews said right before Alex Gordon hit the walk-off 2-run home run and almost sparked this unbelievable run to close the year. He said, if this is your year, these are the games you win. If this is not your year, these are the games you lose. And seconds later, Alex Gordon popped one over the wall and the Royals won it. Now, as I said, that was far more of a monumental moment because it was so late in the season. The Royals were for real. We had evidence at that point they were going to be making a push for a wild card spot. And this team right now, as good as they've been, it's so early in the year that you can't say for certainty they're going to have a wild card push in August or September. They're going to have to show us that. They're going to have to show us in 20, 30, or 40 of the next games, this is absolutely for real. But I thought that quote was fitting for last night because Nelson Velasquez in that spot against Logan Gilbert was maybe the most unlikely spot for the Royals to take the lead. It was really, in my opinion, a long shot. That felt like a big mismatch, even with Logan Gilbert reaching 100 pitches. At that point, I'm going, you just kind of hope Velasquez walks, or you're hoping that he just guides one between the 5-6 hole. That's what you're hoping for. But he parked one over the wall in left field. He hadn't homered since the White Sox series all the way back to April 4th. That's how long it had been. And we had talked about it on Monday's episode about, he's not necessarily hitting poorly right now. He's now hit safely in 6 of 7. And he has this 3-run homer to go with it. But we talked about for a DH, you can't just be a singles hitter. If you're going to play every single day, if you're going to show your hitting coaches, you're going to show your manager, I need to be in the lineup every single day. That needs to be a spot that is mine. It's got to be more power coming with your game. And Nelson Velasquez identifies with power. He is a type of player that if the power's not there, he's not going to give you it defensively. He's not going to give you it on the base path. And he's not going to give you it with the overall hit tool. He's got immense power. He's a very strong man. And last night, he showed what he can do with even a pitch that's down and in. He's got the power. He's got the muscle to just rip that one over the wall. And maybe that does get him going. Maybe it's that monkey off your back. It allows you to exhale and go, I've seen one leave the park now. I've now hit safely in 6 of 7. I feel like I'm coming around. And it goes back to that Denny Matthews quote. Of course, it's the guy who's been slumping, at least power-wise, over the last month and a half. No, Salvador Perez or Bobby Witt Jr. or Vinny Pasquantino hits the go-ahead 3-run shot. Yeah, I think we're all jumping up and down and would use this quote, but it's different when it comes from this player against that team in a part that you've lost 8 in a row. I mean, the more that I have watched this team, which has been every single night, every single game, I just get this feeling that there is something unique, there is something special that even if it doesn't end up with a playoff spot, even if this feeling, this moment isn't reaching its highest potential, it's not reaching the ceiling. Let's say they only get to 79 or 80 wins and they fall 5 or 6 games short. There's something special about this team with the feeling of, wow, they are putting together a year so far, just through 44 games, but so far that is giving the feeling of this may be one of the single greatest turnarounds in Major League Baseball history. We keep waiting for that series, that game to go back to the usual Royals, right? We keep waiting for that 5, 6, 7 game losing streak, and it may still happen. Like we said, it's only 44 games into the year. But the longer that's being pushed off, the longer we can start to believe this could be their year. Not to win a World Series, but to snap that postseason drought, to get Kauffman Stadium packed for October. Maybe they don't get a home playoff game. Maybe it's all on the road, but it's getting into the playoffs nonetheless. You win games like last night, and you keep doing that sparingly throughout the season, you're going to convince more and more people this is, in fact, your year. Okay, we're going to take our first break of the show. Coming up next, we're going to talk about Michael Wacha, who put together a second straight quality start. Is he starting to figure out things again? We'll dive into that next on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I am your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Before we dive into Michael Wacha's outing from last night, let's talk about the title sponsor today in PrizePicks. With PrizePicks, we all know that baseball season is officially underway, so don't miss your chance to add your favorite from the diamond in your PrizePicks entries. Whether it's strikeouts, RBIs, or first inning runs, take of more or less and add them to your PrizePicks entries today. You can also get in on the playoff action and win 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match of up to $100. Again, that's Locked On MLB, LOCKEDONMLB, for a first deposit match of up to $100. Well, sometimes lost in a come-from-behind victory where the offense is the one that produces the fireworks, we forget about the starting pitcher. Now, if that starting pitcher gave up 5 to 6 or 7 runs and they were a footnote in that game, different story. Last night, Michael Wacha did what Brady Singer couldn't do the night before, which was go toe-to-toe with whoever the hell Seattle was throwing. George Kirby was absolutely on his game on Monday night, and Logan Gilbert was as well. If Michael Wacha had his B-plus game, the Royals don't get that opportunity in the 7th inning to take the lead. They might have had a chance to tie it or to come within 1, but Michael Wacha had to be damn near perfect in this game. You couldn't slip up too much, and he did at least once in this game when Luke Raley, who just continues to bomb the Royals, had a solo home run in the 4th inning. Other than that, Michael Wacha was flawless. And we put out a little tidbit. We put out a little factoid, if you will, before Michael Wacha started in Anaheim. And last year, through his first 7 starts, he had a very similar ERA to what his first 8 starts looked like in Kansas City. That was ERA was around 5.45, 5.5. No, he had a couple of rough outings. But after that slow start, Michael Wacha went on to give up 9 runs over his next 11 outings. Only 9 runs. And he got his ERA down to 2 point something. I mean, quality start after quality start. He had almost a perfect game against the Royals here at Petco Park in San Diego. Like, Michael Wacha was rolling. And what's funny about this Royals rotation, when I look at everybody, I look at Reagans, I look at Lugo, I look at Marsh, I look at Brady Singer, I sometimes trust Michael Wacha more in spots like last night than I do with some of the rest. Of course, I want Cole Reagans in that spot. Seth Lugo has given the numbers, and Seth Lugo was kind of in that spot on Sunday, but there's something about Michael Wacha Maybe it was because he had really good numbers last year. I've watched Michael Wacha for most of my young adult life, whether it be for St. Louis, whether it be for Tampa, whether it be for Boston. He has always found a way to just grind through outings and quietly be really good. And maybe it's the changeup, maybe it's the velo spike that we've been seeing. It is only 2 starts, but this is exactly what happened last year when he started to get going a little bit. And that was a huge spot for him to be in. Because getaway days, playing to avoid a sweep in game 3, and putting that on the shoulders of Alec Marsh would have been an even tougher spot that even Michael Wacha was in last night. But Michael Wacha, to me, can be the X factor of this rotation. Reagans has had, 2 really rough outings this year. Brady Singer was roughed up on Monday. Seth Lugo has been just flawless, but we also understand, Reagans is going to even out. Lugo is going to even out. Singer is going to even out. Alec Marsh is going to even out. To me, if Michael Wacha can give you what he gave the Padres last year, I think that's where it can be the difference of this rotation being able to sustain success long enough to make a late playoff. Michael Wacha turning into 2023 Michael Wacha would do wonders because you're already feeling good about your first 3. You feel fantastic about your number 5 starter in Alec Marsh. But Michael Wacha underperforming early on in the year was that, man, if they could just get Michael Wacha going, if they could just get him over that hump, you would feel like anybody taking the ball every 5th day is going to have a great game, is going to have a great outing. You just felt confident about it. Now, he's going to start against Detroit. I don't think it's an off day on Monday, so it'll be Reagans, Lugo, and Singer against Oakland over the weekend. So that lines up for Wacha to start game 1 against Detroit, and a Detroit team that doesn't have a very good offense. It's almost like Michael Wacha can step up to the task when the team is better. That lineup is better. It's on the road. It's a tough spot. I thought he was fine in his first start as a Royal in Baltimore, and I thought he was pretty good against a Mariners team that doesn't have an elite lineup. In fact, a lineup that struggles a lot, but still a tough pitch or a tough place to pitch in. A lineup that still has a lot of pop, a lot of power, a lot of star power. And he was fantastic yesterday. He was absolutely fantastic. And to me, that's something you can build on. That's a guy you can have confidence in. That's a guy that a lot of the young pitchers look up to. I was glad that the offense gave him even a little bit more cushion, or at least the bullpen more cushion, so they could hold on for that win. Because there were a couple of games this year that Michael Wacha just didn't get the run support, or at least until he exited the game, which that's not giving him run support. That's giving the bullpen run support. But I was glad John Schreiber, James MacArthur were able to close that thing down, give him a much-deserved win. It was great that Daniel Lynch in Anaheim on Thursday night was able to get out of that brutal jam in the 7th that allowed Wacha to hang on for the win. The Royals also had a massive lead. So I talk about lack of run support. He got a ton of it in his previous start against the Los Angeles Angels. But he was even better against Seattle last night. That was a gutty performance. That was an impressive win. That was an impressive outing. And now we'll see if he can make it 3 straight quality starts when he takes the bump back at Kauffman Stadium against the Detroit Tigers. Before we move on to our final segment, I want to give a shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you canvas analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, the Royals have another rubber match coming up this afternoon. First pitch of 3:10. It'll be Alec Marsh going up against Brian Wu, who just made his first regular season start of the year last time out against Oakland. So we'll talk about that game, preview it a little bit, and look ahead to the weekend when the Royals return home. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. You are tuning to Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15 and find our podcast on wherever you download your podcast, and we are on YouTube. Before we dive into our final segment, a shout out to our final sponsor in Policygenius. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/LockedOnMLB. Another rubber match presents itself to the Royals this afternoon. It'll be Alec Marsh making his second start since returning from the injured list, going up against Brian Wu, who just entered the regular season, I should say. He was coming off the injured list as well because he wasn't with the team to begin the year, was dealing with an injury. He started against Oakland, threw 4 1/3, only gave up 1 hit, was dominant. Brian Wu is one of many young up-and-coming pitchers in that Seattle system. He was kind of alongside George Kirby in that come-up last year, Emerson Hancock as well. It's turning into a pitching factory in Seattle in the same way that Cleveland has been a pitching factory for years. But there is no drop-off here. I mean, you go from George Kirby to Logan Gilbert. The Royals were just fortunate they didn't have to see Luis Castillo, who started the game before this Royals series opened up. But Brian Wu is no slouch. The only thing you can hope for is that he's still rusty, and he was really good last time out, and you feel like a guy that's rusty and joining the team, not mid-season, but a little bit into the season. He's going to have that outing or two where it shows you that time off is going to impact your start to the year. So that's what you're hoping for. That's what you're crossing your fingers for, that even though you don't get this room to breathe, you don't get this time to inhale and exhale and go, all right, we've got some scrub coming in to throw to us in game 3. You kind of hope that the lack of consistency of just playing time, of having 8, 9, 10 starts under your belt, maybe that can show today. Now, the same thing goes for Alec Marsh, that even though he opened up with 6 starts of the year before getting hit by a line drive on his forearm, he had a really good start against a bad lineup in Anaheim. He got 19 swings and misses, but I'm sure Seattle's going, well, he was coming off the injured list, and even though he missed just 2 starts, he did miss some time. He had to build back up again. No, he didn't have his usual start every 5th day. He had to make sure the swelling went down. Then he had to start in Omaha. Then he had to start in Anaheim, and now he'll get another start today. This will be a great test, I think, for Alec Marsh. And what I have been so impressed with this year, not so much of the swing and miss. We knew Alec Marsh had that to his game. It's not even been the velocity. It's not been the overall numbers. I remember last year, the one aspect of Alec Marsh's arsenal, of his abilities, that I just kept going back to was, man, for as much as the swing and miss is there, for as much as that curveball, that changeup can play, the ball leaves the yard a lot when he's on the mound. And that just can't happen. You can't give up 3 home runs every single time out and expect to win that game. Now, that's exaggerating it a little bit. That's being a little bit too strongly worded with a guy like Alec Marsh. But at the end of the day, that is an area that he's been able to diminish a lot in other teams' offensive threats. That's what he's been able to neutralize, if you will, when facing a really loaded lineup. Whether it be, working backwards, whether it be being able to put guys away with 2 strikes, because that happened to him as a rookie a lot. He'd get ahead in the count, and then he'd leave a 1-2 pitch or a 0-2 pitch in a hittable spot. And those great hitters are going to deposit that over the wall at the big level. Now, he had struggled with that as well at the minor league level. So that just kind of felt like a part of his game where you go, it's who he is. That's not going to change. His stuff can get better, but sometimes guys are going to be able to get a hold of what he's offering. And today, that's what I'm going to be curious for, because both Brady Singer and Mike got bitten by the long ball. James MacArthur got bitten by the long ball as well. Chris Stratton got bitten by the long ball. Alec Marsh going into a rubber match in a spot like this, 2 young guns, 2 young right-handers in Wu and Marsh, I would expect another pitcher's duel. I was talking to a coworker actually at the studio before this series began, and I said, there's probably going to be a lot of 3-2, a lot of 4-2 games, and We got 6-2 on Monday night, but it was 4-2 going into the final innings. And then it was 4-2 last night. And it wouldn't shock me today if it was another pitcher's duel. It was another 3-1 outcome. It's another 4-2. It's, maybe even if the offense gets going a little bit, a 5-3 game. But I just don't envision somebody on either end imploding. Even if Alec Marsh doesn't look good, I could see something like the Brady Singer start, where you get through 5 innings, give up 4 runs. The issue with this Seattle series is you can't really blink too many times, if you will. You can't be a starter and put your offense in this Royals offense into a 4-0 hole. And even though the Royals have had to come from behind numerous times in the first 2 games, I am curious if the Royals do jump out on Brian Wu, if we can see what the Seattle offense looks like when they're chasing 2, they're chasing 3, they're chasing 4. I think we would see a lot of similar bats that we saw from the Royals on Monday night, or maybe through 6 innings of game 2. That, to me, is what you hope to see today, because the rubber match has been an issue for the Royals this year. Now, they did get their last rubber match win against Milwaukee, and this game feels even a little bit more favorable than that Milwaukee game was. That Milwaukee game, you were coming off the emotional downfall of the Willy Adames 3-run home run in the 9th inning of James MacArthur. That kind of started this feeling of, is the bullpen going to be able to lock it down most nights? So that felt less likely to win the rubber match than it does today, because you are coming off the emotional high of Nelson Velasquez's 3-run home run and the bullpen with John Schreiber and James MacArthur being able to lock it down. And MacArthur had to have a 4-out save. So you use your 2 best guys. I'd imagine Schreiber, who had to work, an inning and 2/3, that he's probably unavailable, and he got hit by a line drive on the back. So I don't envision him going out there today if the Royals have a 1 or 2 run lead late. James MacArthur could. We've seen him work multiple days before, but coming off a 4-out save, we saw him do it after a 6-out save, I think it was. So maybe, just maybe, Matt Quatraro would go to him again, but Angel Serpa is somebody you could go to in a spot. I'm sure Chris Stratton would have an opportunity to close. I know people don't want to hear that, but that seems to be the theme. Will Smith, who's been really good over his last 7 or 8 outings, I'd imagine he could get a shot. Maybe Nick Anderson. I know not a lot of people want to hear that, but we could see a game today in which the Royals really need that offense to come through, because if that offense doesn't come through, you're not going to have your best bullpen guys late, or at least we're not expecting. And you don't want to have to come back against the Seattle bullpen, which is just as good as their starting rotation. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson. Find me on Twitter at JohnnyJ_15, and you can find me on wherever you download podcasts and on YouTube as well. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. This is not the only episode we're going to do today, since I was dealing with a family matter last night. Wanted to get an episode out this morning. We are going to have another one later on tonight, so a 2-episode day here. We are going to really just break down what happened between Alec Marsh and Brian Wu, preview a little bit of that upcoming series against Oakland and Detroit, and another snapshot, I think we could say, of this 45-game sample size, and maybe also take a dive into the AL Central and where everybody stacks up right now. One last shout out to Locked On Sports Today. It's here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with our experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available for free on the Fire TV Channels app. So tonight, we're going to have a breakdown of Game 3, but until then, you take it easy.